I'm Charles Epting from HR Harmer in New York City.
And I'm Michael Cortese of Noble Spirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
And I want to apologize to our listeners today because even though this show is called Conversations with Philatelists,
Okay.
we're not speaking to a philatelist today.
Right.
I'm going to explain a little bit of background, if that's all right, because
Yes,
today's guest may seem like a curveball for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Before I ever collected stamps, because I didn't get into stamp collecting until I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
I collected everything, books, fossils, dinosaurs, you name it. But my first love in life, Michael,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that really got me hooked on collecting,
Mm-hmm.
you know this, I'm not sure that anybody else listening knows this. It was Star Wars Legos.
Yeah.
When I was, I think, 5 years old in 1999, when the Star Wars license came into Lego's hands, and they released Luke's Land Speeder and the X-Wing and Vader's TIE Fighter, and I was hooked. This is the same year the Phantom Menace came out in 1999,
Mm-hmm.
and I instantly had to have all of them.
Yeah.
And that same compulsion carries through to my stamp collecting. I've got an album of Irish stamps sitting over here, and I have to have all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those constants in my life. It feels like nothing has changed. When I start collecting, when I start trying to fill in every box or check everything off of a list, I'm instantly transported back to being 5 years old again. And I have those Star Wars Legos, many of which I still have somewhere in a box, and some of which I have since recollected. So long story short, why am I telling this about my Star Wars Lego, fandom as a child? There's a YouTube channel I watch called MandRproductions,
Mm-hmm.
puts out great videos about Lego Star Wars. These videos get tens, hundreds of thousands of views. The Lego Star Wars collecting community is incredibly active. Ryan McCullough of MandRproductions is one of the leaders of the Lego Star Wars community. I was watching an episode a week or two ago, and he made some offhanded comment about how he would love to speak on somebody's podcast. And I thought, we don't have a Lego Star Wars podcast, but we do have a collecting podcast.
Yeah.
We have a podcast about collecting something very different from Lego Star Wars, postage stamps. But it got me thinking, what are the similarities and the differences? Michael, you've been to stamp shows, right?
Yes.
Not a trick question. You've been to stamp shows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been together. What if I told you there were Lego conventions?
Yeah.
And there were competitions, just like there's competitions at a stamp show for the exhibiting. The builds get judged, and there's a bourse, and there's lectures and panels, and the Lego shows are just like a stamp show.
Can I interject real quick? You said the builds get judged. Isn't it's not on the front of the box? I mean, do they?
Well, yeah. People build their own customs. They're called mocks, my own creation, MOC. Mock, like they've got their own lingo, just like we've got our own stamp lingo.
Yeah.
So people build their mocks, and then they get them judged. Who put together the best, robot or Star Wars landscape or car or something like that. So I wanted to talk to Ryan again. I've watched his YouTube channel for years now. During the pandemic last year, his channel was a huge part of what kept me occupied during the day, and I thought this would be a good opportunity, again, on two levels. On the one hand, I will always be that little kid who remembers when the first Lego Star Wars sets came out, and I would take them to school and lose a piece on the playground. And this is who I was. But on the other hand, now that you and I are both professionals in another collectible hobby, I thought it would be fun for us to just talk to somebody who is, on the one hand, similar, on the other hand, so radically different.
So you pitched me this idea, and what I found fascinating was you said this is his full-time job, reviewing Lego Star Wars sets.
Yes,
Are they
his
sets
YouTube
or kits or
sets, exactly,
sets
and
on
YouTube.
That's his. You said he was buying a house. That's his full-time job. We're professional philatelists selling stamps, but he doesn't even sell. He's not like a Lego dealer.
Imagine if we made Conversations with Philatelists our full-time job. It would be incredible.
I mean, that's just the hobby there is so vibrant, I hear, that there's enough information to soak up to warrant this guy having a full channel that pays his bills.
Yes, it shows you that collecting is not dead amongst young people. Collecting is not, again, yes, there's a million distractions and people can, partake in any sort of hobby they want. But at the end of the day, kids in particular and young adults still want to collect. They still want to own. They still want to track down that last one that's missing from their collection. And I think that, again, we sort of have blinders on sometimes. We get fixated on our stamp world. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to talk to Ryan and explore a totally different universe of collectibles.
Yeah.
We were on a baseball card podcast.
We were. Yeah, that was just a few weeks ago. And I think we forget exactly. I mean, we had the coin show in the bottom of the Chicago show there, right underneath, and we had this some crossover as far as the talks went, some crossover as far as I saw people coming up with their coin badges on with the same similar APS badges. So I mean, yeah, we forget sometimes that there's this crossover and people don't just have to collect one thing. So I thought this was an interesting concept that you wanted to talk about. What got you into collecting? Because I think I'm correct in saying, if not for Lego Star Wars, you would not be here today.
I don't think I would be collecting stamps. It has been a lot of like soul searching for me that like if it wasn't for these sets coming out when I was a kid, and there's something about a Lego set that's very orderly and hierarchical, and you've got the instruction. And I think there's a lot of analogs to stamp collecting. When you're hinging stamps into an album, it sort of triggers the same endorphins or whatever in my brain that building a Lego set does. I think it's sort of adding, you have this big pile of pieces, you have this big pile of stamps, and you have to add order and rationality to it. You have to make sense of it. And I think that really helped lay the foundation for my, adulthood stamp collecting. Yeah. So
it's an interesting concept. I'm excited to dive into this topic of how does the two collecting worlds relate as far as it comes to
when you find out what some of these Lego sets go for, Noble Spirit may expand their business model because sometimes it blows my mind. Again, we'll let Ryan talk about that, but again, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, not with a philatelist, admittedly, but with a fellow collector, a kindred spirit. I think this one will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. All right, let's bring him in.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Huge fan of your channel. Really appreciate you, coming on, even though we're a stamp podcast, coming to share some thoughts about the Lego collecting community.
I don't know if this is a bad joke or not, but I've used a stamp a time or two.
So I'm sure that most people listening to this do not even know that. I mean, they're probably aware of Lego. It's the largest toy company on the planet.
Yeah, you have to be.
Exactly. Yeah. But I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fervor and the community and the, again, a lot of kids maybe get a Lego set for Christmas or whatnot, but there is a lot more to it. And there's a lot of teens and adults who are equally passionate and enthusiastic about Lego. Can you talk a little bit about first yourself and your channel and your history, and then sort of what the larger Lego community is like?
So my, I don't know, one paragraph synopsis of my entire history is I was 5 years old and I started getting Lego sets like anyone would, like I think Charles was saying before we started here. But for me, unlike with you, I just kind of never got out of it, which is odd because most people have their, what they call dark age, and you'll stop collecting because you grow up and you Legos for kids and all that. And so a lot of people grow out of it in middle school, high school. Then some people come back, obviously, like you. I don't know if Michael collects or not, but
Michael's actually going to buy the Seinfeld set. That's the one that's going to get Michael back in.
Whatever gets you in the door. Yeah, Seinfeld, cool set. I know that one's pretty popular, but yeah, so I never got out of it. And then in 2009, oh, hey, here's this really cool website called YouTube. This exists. I'm 12 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. Me and a friend down the street started a channel to compete with another couple of friends in our 6th grade class because, they had 20 subscribers and it was like, we need to beat them. And so, we made a few skit videos, but really my first video and what ended up being most of what I would upload to that channel is just random Lego crap of here's a review. You definitely want to hear a 12-year-old's thought on this Lego set. And it's 2012 or 2009, and YouTube is not what it is today. There is no you can be a billionaire from YouTube idea. It's just you want to become popular because it's cool at school, right? And so it's just kind of morphed into this thing where I now make videos for a living, which is insane, right? I'm sure you guys find your occupation's pretty crazy too, as if you're avid fans of what you do, right? It's a pretty cool thing. So yeah, it's just, I kind of skipped 10 years there, but essentially I just kept going at it and I never dropped out of it, and it's worked out pretty well for me. But yeah, I wanted to pick up where Charles was earlier. If you, Charles, you want to like bridge us back into that?
Yeah. So what I was saying is that one thing we hear a lot is, specifically in terms of stamps, but also, a larger point is that young people, there's so many distractions. There's video games, there's iPhones, there's all sorts of things. And I hear from a lot of people that young people don't like it. Yeah. Let me take this.
They're glued to their phone.
Right. And they don't like to collect anymore. There's no interest in collecting. And I think that's the wrong attitude to take, and maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so my experience with this, I guess it's going to always, as with anything, vary from person to person, because I can take examples from all sorts of different people. If I can look at my brother the next room over, and he doesn't collect anything, he doesn't care. He's got like 5 Legos, that's whatever. I wouldn't call it collecting though, right? I'm sure you wouldn't either. It's just you have a few things. And then I know one of my friends, Lorenzo, that I play basketball with, and he doesn't like post anything online or anything, but he's got like 200 Star Wars Funko Pops, and like that's just what he collects, right? So I think it's going to vary on the person, but I definitely think the idea, I actually hadn't heard this, the idea that like young people don't like collecting things anymore is probably misguided. Like it's like, but also young people collect things online. You have to remember that too. Yeah. They collect the Fortnite skins or the Call of Duty guns or whatever it is. Like and I haven't found myself too super into that, but like that is definitely a thing where people collect that sort of stuff. I know NFTs are just coming up, and that is definitely going to be something that I think younger folks might find themselves more interested in than older people. But and I'm not sure what, if you guys have tried to have a foray into that world, but it is mine. I still don't understand any of it, but like I'm sure it is a thing amongst some kids where it's like, oh, I got to have this latest cyberpunk of this NFT or whatever it is. So
we catch ourselves having conversations, and then in the middle of the conversation say we don't know what we're talking about.
And there's actually, I think 1 or 2 countries have actually tried to issue NFT stamps.
Yes. Yeah.
They've tried to combine the 2 collecting fields somehow.
Yeah.
The only way that works is if you're charging people to send emails, but it's free. So like, how does that work?
They're purely collectible. So it's
just it's
private people designing stamps with actual postage denominations that they can't then use.
Right. And I think it was Austria that did a stamp that was backed by blockchain technology. Yeah. Whatever that, I don't know how a stamp can be backed by blockchain, but they've tried.
That's my thing with it. I'm like, how does it work? You have to literally have a physical thing, and all this stuff is digital, and it only works if you're charging people for emails, which you're not.
Right.
So like, that's interesting though. I had not heard that at all, but I would wonder, like, have you guys tried to like collect those? I know you said you have an auction house. Have you auctioned off any NFT stamps or no?
We haven't. Everything we do is still physical. I think it would confuse everybody, myself most of all, if I didn't even know what I was
Okay,
selling.
You won this. How do I give it to you?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, we'll send you a link via email.
I'll just send you a picture of it. Yeah, I'll keep the real one. It's good. It's all the same. Yeah, that's the craziest stuff to me. But I would disagree that young people don't collect that, because I would see myself as living proof. I think I'm still young. I'm 24, right? So like, and a lot of my friends around me collect certain things, but it's also, I think another factor of it is like for people in middle school, high school, whatever, it depends on where you're at, especially getting into college when you actually have things you have to pay for. Like people just don't have the money for it. Like some people collect Lego, but they like, they can only buy a few sets, and like deciding what to buy is like really a tough choice at that point for some people, because like you want to collect, but you can't go in too deep because you literally can't afford it. So, and I don't know how expensive stamp collecting is. That's certainly not my forte. Maybe you have a good example for me, but like for Lego, it's relatively expensive, or at least most people perceive it as expensive. But I would say there are things that are far more expensive to collect, than Lego. Sports cards. Depends on what sport card, but like I think that's got a lot of like, I think people my age or our age, I would say, into that world, mostly because of the investing aspect of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's something
that's always a difficult topic in stamps.
Yeah, that's something that's sort of come up in stamps every decade or two. There's sort of an investment bubble and investment craze that pans out different ways. But yeah, that seems to be where sports cards are headed now. You've talked about Legos as an investment. I feel like this would sort of blow people's minds who don't follow Lego closely. That a set that's only been out of production for a year or two might double or triple in value in a very short amount of time. Stamps, we're talking about things that are 150 years old, in a lot of cases 100 years old. You can have a Lego set from 5 years ago that's worth considerably more than you could have bought it for at Target.
Do stamps not like increase in value like that, or?
They do, but not at the speed. When a stamp isn't issued anymore, I wouldn't say it immediately increases in multiples at that kind of speed.
There's stamps that were taken off sale 10 years ago that you can still get at what it would have cost
face value. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So I guess a good example for me, I guess, would be sitting right behind me. So this is 10 years ago now at this point. This set here originally cost $250, right?
Okay.
Which is at the time a mighty price. Some people might scoff at that for a toy, not a toy, but now if you want one, you go on eBay, sealed in the box, just like you would have bought it from Lego store. It's going to cost you a cool $1,000 at the very least. That's four times the money. And there's lots of other examples. I think an example a lot of people would know a lot about, or like most people could relate to, is the Slave One, because most people have probably seen the new Mandalorian season and seen that Boba Fett came back, and you know what the Slave One if you're there. That set retired 2.5 years ago or so, and it originally sold for $200, and it has quickly tripled in value to about $600 right now. And if you're watching this at a later date, this is still before the new Boba Fett show has come out, and so that value, while probably part of its current value, still isn't fully into it, and I think it's going to hit like $1,000 like real quick.
Interesting.
It's kind of scary.
As far as you say $600, $1,000, but that's new in box. What if you have one like on your shelf pre-constructed?
So yeah, as with anything, the condition is going to vary your value, right? Yeah. So usually my like the general rule of thumb, I would say, with buying something used versus new, is you're going to get it for like 25 to 50% less than what it's going to cost as a new item. Like that's just what it is. It just depends on what it is, so it's hard to know, because it'll definitely vary by item. The other thing with investing in Lego, like you said, it takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And that is a big thing. That's something that sports cards don't do. Stamps certainly don't do. And there's Pokemon cards, whatever you want to say. Like, it's something that's going to take up a lot of space in your to make a considerable amount of money for people that are actually interested in investing in it. Like, that's why I typically try not to, is like, it'll just swamp your whole garage like that.
Yeah.
And it's, you get a stamp book, and you have, I don't know how many stamps are going to fit in your.
You can put thousands in one binder.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus Michael, you should see the size of some of the boxes for like a Millennium Falcon or a Star Destroyer.
I have a quick example for you real quick. This is what I literally some of the other ones. This is what I just bought at the Lego store. This is a big Harry Potter set I just got. And you can start to get the idea that this, if you want to buy 10 of these to have and invest in, to hopefully make some good money over time, that's going to take up a good amount of space.
So what does that one cost?
That one is about $200, I think $250 maybe. I just got it today, and that's about it. And so the thing is, like, for the entirety of its release cycle of most Lego sets, some of them, a lot of scalpers get flack for this. Obviously, it's a typically frowned upon practice by any fan community. When a set comes out and it sells out, you can get some immediate return. Yeah. But obviously, the best returns will always be over the long term with anything, and barring re-releases and stuff. But like, something like that, if you're investing in it day one, you're gonna have it sit on your shelf for 2 years and not appreciate it all in value, right? So you just got dead money, and then, maybe a year after you could make $100, but you got to look 10 years down the line to make the real money from what I've seen looking back. And, it's just a lot of space and money to have sitting on a shelf to be investing like that. So I don't know.
So a phrase that I really liked hearing you use was dark age, because that's a term that we hear amongst stamp collectors as well. And I'd say the typical trajectory of a stamp collector is they start as a kid, especially in the mid 20th century, this was one of the main hobbies a kid would get interested in. And then they go off to high school, go off to college, get married, have kids, job, all that stuff, and then sort of return to it retirement age, when the kids are out of the house and they have some more disposable income and time. Right. But it sounds like the dark ages for Lego, especially in my case, as we were saying earlier, I collected from age like 5 until 12, I would say, and then got back into it within the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So do you think people come back around to it? Is that dark age shorter? What age do you think people rediscover their love for Lego? And, what's sort of the average typical viewer that you have?
It's going to depend. But you are, how old are you? 27?
28.
28. So like, you know, you're gonna have people like yourself that get back into it later. But I think a lot of it now is like when people discover YouTube videos, it helps a lot. Like it's a lot different now than what the dark age of old would have been, where you would kind of just grassroots kind of rediscover it. Maybe if you're lucky, you had a kid and you just, hey, I like this thing, I want to keep doing it. But for the longest time, Lego was seen almost solely as a kid's toy and only had this like kind of cult following for its, you know, older fandom. And then I think with the internet and the rise of that, now the YouTube, obviously Instagram, TikTok now, it has really helped push this idea that Lego is more than just a kid's toy, which it kind of always has been. It's just not, it used to not be so socially acceptable. And you dropping off at the age of 12 is a pretty good example of like, I don't know if social pressures were particularly put on you, but you know, a lot of kids collecting at 12 years old, it's like your friends are like, Legos are for babies. Why do you still have these? You know, I hear a lot of those of like, that's what happened to me type of stories. And it's like, yeah, that can happen. That'll people get bullied out of it more or less, I guess.
And to be all through high school like that, you know, my teens and everything, I collected Lego architecture because that felt like the adult. That was like the socially acceptable Lego to collect. And I love them. I still have all my, you know, original architecture sets. But then, you know, beginning of this year, there's nothing better than getting an X-wing and, you know, locking the S foils into attack position. Like that's still as great as it is to build like a skyline of Chicago or whatever. Like I want the Star Wars, you know, I want the so I think that's a good point, that Lego sort of had this image as a purely child's toy.
And I think it helps having themes like Star Wars, like Harry Potter, that have a lot of older fans now too, because that gets people in the door. You know what I mean? Like most people probably aren't going to walk down the Lego aisle, pick out this architecture set and be like, oh, wow, I guess I'm into this now. You know, I would imagine most people get in the door because of one of these big licensed themes, which some people say is ruining Lego. You know, I'm sure there are similarities in the stamp world of what might be ruining stamps, but, you know, older people harken back to no, I think it's younger kids too. They're like, oh, there's too many licensed themes. We need more Ninjago. For those that don't know what Ninjago is, just like a original IP that Lego makes of a storyline. And it's, you know, they do all these things, but they don't, it's hard to get a new audience unless you have this big, like Lego pulling in from this big group that they've got existing with Star Wars, Harry Potter, whatever else. You know, they do random things like what you were going to buy the Seinfeld set. If they're not doing these random things, it doesn't draw people in. You can't draw people in with another police car. It's not going to happen.
And with stamps, they do it kind of thematically too. I mean, there's the Star Wars stamps that were issued earlier in the year, and they try to pull in people by, let's throw Bugs Bunny on stamps. Let's throw these different themes, and topical collecting within stamps is absolutely massive. I'd say it's probably, if not the one of the largest collecting niches inside of stamp collecting itself. So that's interesting that within different collecting communities, there's all this outreach to try and find people outside of the traditional Lego collector who might be interested in Harry Potter. So if there's crossover there, it could bring people in.
No, yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge thing, is just having like a gateway drug essentially to collecting an item. I was gonna ask you, so who makes stamps is my question. I have a point to all this, I think, depending on what your answer is. Like who, like, can any company just make stamps, or does it have to be for the United States, I mean, the United States Postal Service, are they the only people who can issue stamps?
Yeah.
Legally, they're the only ones who can issue stamps for the
work, right?
Exactly, for the conveyance. Now there are certain little exceptions. We have some friends who they want to just create their own stamps for the heck of it, and maybe they'll carry mail from one end of their street to the other end of the street and call that a postal service. So there are little loopholes, but in the U.S., if it's a first-class letter being delivered from point A to point B, the U.S. Postal Service is the only ones.
And so they used to also, they just discontinued it. You used to be able to print your own images on stamps. So you could design your own stamp and then print it out as legal postage. And in Canada, they still do it. And they're highly collectible there. We found out just a few episodes ago by talking to a Canadian philatelist. But they've discontinued that in the U.S. now.
Oh, I had no idea that was a thing. Maybe that's why they had to discontinue it. They had bad advertising. But my point, I guess my point there was going to be, so like Lego is obviously like a for-profit company. They want to make products that people want to buy, or at least that's what consumers hope. But if you're the stamp company or the United States Postal Service, like you're making these stamps, but are they making them specific? Like, do they make stamps to try and get more people to collect, or are these just other companies and things that want to work with the Postal Service and just have their stuff on stamps because it's like advertising? Like, I'm curious, like the way that it works, like from a behind the scenes standpoint of like, I don't know, it just seems weird to me that they would, or like, not weird, but like, it's interesting that if the sole job of the Postal Service is to just sell stamps for mail, why they would bother with all these extra things.
That's a really good question. I think the most, I don't want to say heated, the most criticism I saw of the post office was when the Harry Potter set of stamps came out.
Okay.
I want to say that was around 2015 or so. It was a set of 20 stamps with all the main characters on it.
Right.
There was a lot of criticism because Harry Potter is a British property. Why would they be on a United States set of stamps?
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people just wondered whether they were necessary because historically stamps have been for presidents, first ladies, inventors, writers, maybe an occasional athlete or something, but it's always been quite a prestigious honor. You can't be on a stamp while you're alive. You have to be dead before you can be put on a stamp.
Oh, really?
That was another criticism because people are saying, well, Daniel Radcliffe is alive and well.
Yeah. Oh, but it's a fictional version.
Exactly. It wasn't Daniel Radcliffe. It's not Mark Hamill on a stamp. It's Luke Skywalker.
That is
quite
on a stamp. The loophole, I suppose.
It is. So you end up getting a ton of living people on stamps. So there is, it's sort of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I think people feel like it waters down the purity of the post office.
Right.
Stamps used to be literally just George Washington and Ben Franklin over and over. But I think that, again, the other edge of that sword is that, as a kid, my two loves were Star Wars and dinosaurs. And when dinosaur stamps came out, my mother would go to the post office and buy me a sheet of dinosaur stamps. I wouldn't have bought stamps otherwise. And I'm sure, when the Star Wars, the set of droid stamps, did you know that there was a set of droid stamps that came out this week?
I think I did see them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got BB-8. It's got all the different, and I'm sure there are kids who would never buy a stamp ever.
Right.
But they see C-3PO and R2-D2 and everything. And Dio and whatnot, and they love that. So there are people on both sides of the argument. Some of them think that it's a cheap cash grab,
right?
Try and get people to buy stamps. The other thing, not to be cynical, but if you buy a set of Star Wars stamps and stick them in a frame and never use them, you're paying the post office for services that they will never have to render.
Correct.
Whereas if you buy a stamp, they actually have to perform labor in exchange for that money.
Right.
So I do think that there is a push to get collectors to buy stamps because that's essentially pure profit, whatever it costs.
That is a good point. However, the other thing is, the Postal Service is not supposed to turn a profit.
Right. They're certainly doing a good job of not turning
it's like, that's a really good point. I agree. It is literally free. They're literally printing money. But like they're not supposed to, so it's like.
Well, and the other bit of the puzzle, moving out of the U.S. for a second, there are countries, especially small island nations, that use stamps and commemorative coins as a major source of revenue. So these countries will produce stamps for Princess Diana, for the U.S. presidential elections, for anything and everything, and you're never going to send a letter from Kiribati or some of these little countries. So you're in that case, it is just printing money, but it's a huge source of revenue for a country that doesn't have many other sources of revenue. So it's
because people like yourself will buy them or other collectors and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Exactly.
So if you collect Star Wars stamps, you're going to need the Star Wars stamps, whether they are U.S. stamps that are legitimately issued for postage, or whether it's St. Vincent or some tiny little Caribbean island nation. You want the stamps. So there is a huge aspect of stamp collecting that is purely commercial.
Additionally, I mean, we have these trade shows that, as Charles was telling me earlier, that you guys have these massive trade shows for Legos. The USPS shows up to them, and they do what they call first day cover ceremonies. So you can go and you can buy a stamp that was just been issued, and they'll cancel it there. So you pay them for the forever stamp, 58 cents. You give them the 58 cents, and they stamp it on the envelope to stamp the date that the stamp was issued. So you've then also paid them for a service that they don't actually have to deliver that letter.
They hand it right back to you.
They hand it back to you. So they have a vested interest in collectors maintaining this large fan base for these stamps that they're issuing, because they want people to come buy these sheets, not use them, or go to these first day cover ceremonies and purchase stamps that will never be used.
Huh. That is cool. I like that I'm very surprised to hear that the Postal Service goes to stamp collecting.
Oh yeah,
they're
massive there. They're one of the biggest draws for people.
How many people go to a stamp convention?
It's a good question.
Good question. And this is actually something, because I wanted to sort of compare and contrast a Lego convention with stamps.
Sure.
I would say, there's a big annual stamp show that moves around the country. I would say that gets a couple of thousand people, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people, and probably 100 different dealers.
But then there's every 10 years an international show, which I think brought in 200,000 over the course of 8 days.
I think so. That was last held in New York in 2016. It was at the Javits Convention Center. It was 8 days long. Yeah, hundreds of thousands.
8 days
of people.
Is insane. I can't.
8 days of stamps. That was right after I took my job. That was like my first month on the job. I was like, 8 days in New York. I'm from California originally.
Okay.
So that was new and exciting to me. But so the other thing at a stamp show that I think people don't really realize is that there's a competitive aspect to it, where people mount their stamp collection. They sort of create an exhibit that tells a story, and then there are judges who grade the exhibits and give out different awards based on the exhibit's merit. So can you talk about what it's like to go to a Lego convention?
I can't speak about stamp convention. I was going to say about your stamp convention first real quick. I find it interesting, there's a difference here, right? So if at a stamp convention you're literally showing off your collection, it is I don't want to say frowned upon, but like nobody does it and you're not really supposed to. You don't just show up with your Lego sets at a Lego convention. That's just not how it works. It's like I could show up with some really cool old Lego sets, and I'm sure some people would like it, but you would definitely, like, from the people that go there, like the other people displaying or the exhibitors, you'd probably use the same term, like you definitely get some looks, or like, what is this guy doing? Like, why don't you build something yourself type of deal? You kind of mentioned like showing a story with your stamps. Is that kind of like akin to that, or is it like also just okay to show whatever you have?
I think it's so you sort of take the pieces of what you have and you have to craft them into a narrative. So maybe, before a stamp was issued, what are the original drawings that the artist made? And then the stamp was issued. How was the stamp used?
Right.
And so I think that's sort of the equivalent of I think I mentioned in the introduction to Michael what a mock was. And I think a stamp exhibit is sort of equivalent to a mock, where you take these sort of prefab building blocks, pardon the pun, but and you turn them into something that's more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, I'm not somebody who does that usually. I like just collecting the sets. Like that's just kind of my gig. But so when I go, I just show up, me, my camera, and hang out with friends, right? But yeah, so the difference numbers wise for like the biggest Lego conventions is going to be, you have about 1,000 exhibitors, and then throughout the course there's 2 public days usually, to be Saturday and Sunday. For the one outside of Chicago and the one in Virginia, usually average between 10 and 20,000 people over the 2 days, I think. So probably about 10 times bigger than a stamp convention, 5 to 10 times bigger. Just
and 1,000 exhibitors is
it's a lot of people. Yeah, because it'll be in 100. It also probably takes up a lot more space than stamps, because stamps are smaller. But yeah, it'll be in a 100,000 square foot convention center. And I don't know how big I'm actually kind of curious, how big of a convention center do they end up using for?
I don't know what the square footage was in Chicago.
I don't know. Yeah, I want to say, I know we'll get comments from people who run stamp shows for a living, but I want to say in the 60,000 square foot range. I don't know why
that's pretty big. Yeah, it's still pretty big.
Yeah.
But yeah, a Lego display is physically going to be more sizable than
definitely. But it's also, so the other thing is, like if anyone's coming around to like look at stamps, are they for sale? Like, is any stamp on the table for sale potentially?
Within reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's divided. So there's the exhibiting, which is not for sale. That's people's own, and then
same with Lego.
Yeah, and then then there's the 100 or so dealers where everything is for sale.
Okay.
So for a Lego show, they don't have things like dealers or any? Do they?
Oh, they do. Yeah, yeah.
They do. Okay.
The interesting thing that they actually, for the one in Virginia, had the convention center built this, like, it's an additional building essentially added onto the building that had already existed. So now they just throw all the people that sell stuff over in that side. It's like 30,000 square feet, and it is a immensely popular area. And I'm sure it's the same in stamps, where like people that know what they're looking at, like yourselves, would probably walk over there and be really like, there's probably nothing here for me, but I'll look through anyway. It's probably gonna be mostly a little bit too much for my taste, but yeah, it's still really fun.
They sell discontinued sets and stuff.
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
oh yeah, okay. Lots. That's it is a. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but when you like can see and hold an item, even if it costs a little bit more than it would on eBay, it is tough to walk away from it in your hands.
I feel like at a stamp show, you kind of figure you're going to pay maybe a little bit more. I collect old records as well, and if you see one at a shop, you kind of figure, you're almost paying for the experience of finding it in the wild.
100%. Yeah, no, yeah, there's definitely, there is something for the story behind it as well that's worth the extra $10 or whatever. It depends on how much what you're buying is, but yeah, absolutely.
So I've been thinking about, because Legos were the first thing I collected, and I do see a lot of similarities. I was saying to Michael earlier that the sort of the mood that a Lego set or putting stamps in a stamp album, the headspace it brings me to, and I'm trying to figure out. I know you collect other action, Hasbro a little bit and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
But what is it about Lego that keeps you coming back after all these years? What is it about a Lego set that's different than a Funko Pop or a Hasbro 3 3/4 inch or a Black Series? Why Legos instead of any other toy that you could have collected?
That is almost an impossible question to answer. Because I think there's a lot of reasons like underlying for this, because like part of it is it's literally like the one thing I really liked when I was 7 years old, and it got me into Star Wars and vice versa. And then like it's also become my job for better or for worse, right? So you have that aspect of it. It's like you kind of have to come back, right? It's your source of income. And then like it's just literally something I love to its core. For the most part, like I have issues with it, and I make plenty of videos complaining and criticizing the company and the product. But like for the most part, you don't collect all these sets and not really like it for the for what it is. And so a lot of it is probably nostalgia driven as well. Of like, oh man, the good old days. Let's keep chasing that high. I think part of it is chasing the high. You guys are gonna like this, I think, because you probably have some really good examples. So like for me, part of it is like I remember like 3 years ago, I found some Lego sets. I don't know how stamp releases work, but for a Lego set release, right, there's like the release date and then there's a street date, and it's, you try to work around that sometimes. I'm sure you have street dates and other things, but I found some Lego sets like 3 weeks early, and it is like, I've never done drugs, but I can only imagine, like it is quite a feeling to like chase down some Lego sets, drive 3 hours across the state to Tampa Bay, and like not know if you're about to find them and completely have wasted your time, but then walk in and see the entire wall of things that aren't supposed to be out for 3 weeks, and you're the first one to find them. And it is just a high I can't live without, So I think part of it is chasing the high with in that regard, and some other aspects of it. There's just a high to it that I love, and like the competitive nature of like doing YouTube videos and trying to be successful at that for me is important as well. I don't know what is you have anything akin to that in stamps?
Yeah, they call it the thrill of the hunt.
Yes, that absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you find that thing at a stamp show that you've been looking for years, and a lot of the time it won't even be the most expensive thing that if you wanted to go out and buy a certain discontinued Lego set, you can probably go on eBay and find 10 of them for sale. This
is what I was going to say. Rarity doesn't equal value, right? So you're looking for things that are really rare but not maybe particularly expensive, but you just can't find them, right? Is that exactly. That's the difference. Lego, I can go on eBay and buy anything that's like a retail.
You could go buy. Nobody is going to get this reference, but you could go buy the original Cloud City mint in box.
I got that. Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money, but you can buy it.
But you can go find it, no problem. Yeah. Whereas, there's other, there's these more esoteric things that are much less money, but much more difficult to find.
That's interesting because it's probably your niche little thing of like, hey, hold on, I have a really. Give me just a second. I'll take my headphones off. Sorry. I have a good example for you for Lego, and then I would love to hear a stamp one. So this is a Japanese Lego Star Wars box. Okay. You don't see these every day. They only sold them in Japan, obviously. And so what this is called is a kabaya box, and this was about $400, which you can debate on whether or not it's expensive, I guess. But $400 is just, it is what it is. But like, it's something that I've only ever seen for sale like once, and like when you see that is like such an exciting thing, right? Like, I don't know. It's something cool about having something to chase down, and I fear the day when I've collected it all. I don't know if it's the same for stamps, but there is kind of a finite amount of stuff for Lego Star Wars.
Can I ramble for a second, Michael? You can even cut this out of the finished product. I remember, so the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter, I think, are the same as the ones that were released in the States in the kabaya box. The minis.
Yes, there's just a poly bag inside.
Exactly. And but the Slave 1 is the same design as Jango's Slave 1, but it's in Boba's Slave 1 colors.
I don't know if it's the same exact design, but I guess I would assume it would be.
I think
because it's got the same print and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was a kid, I saw that set on Brick Set for the first time, and I was just fascinated. There was a different colored mini. That is so cool.
All Japanese on the back of center, right?
I remember seeing that on the Brick Set is sort of the Bible of Lego sets. It's this database of everything. Yeah. And I remember being a little kid when the Star Wars minis first came out and seeing that, and I was just fascinated that it was.
I'm sure you're a fan of my display I have back there. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember when you had to get all the different, because each mini came with different pieces for a TIE bomber, and then I remember again, we'll get back on topic in a second, but there was a preview brochure for the mini Snowspeeder and AT-ST. And in the background, you could see the mini AT-AT that wasn't going to come out until a year later. And I remember being
noticed that. I'll have to look into that.
I remember it was the longest year of my life. I had this like poster that I would
for a mini set
for a mini AT-AT. I would like bring it to school and like.
It is so funny. Oh, he froze.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. He got too excited.
Are you there again? Oh. No, he's just straight frozen. Yeah, oh my God, it is there.
My internet cut out because I was
just found it
off topic.
Wow, I have this poster somewhere and I never noticed it.
It was the year before the AT-AT came out. That's one of my vivid memories.
You learn something new every day. Thanks for teaching me something. That's cool. I just dropped a picture in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at it in the
background. I'm sure you'll have some nostalgia with this one.
That's it. Oh my God, that's it.
Yeah.
Look at them back there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I studied that. That was right around the same time that one of my original gunship Super Battle Droid arms broke, and I thought it was the worst day of my life.
Oh, those are notoriously breakable. Yep, I'm sure stamps don't have that kind of issue, right? Because with some of the Lego sets, some of the things age really poorly just because of the way some of the pieces were made back then. And so some things become artificially more rare and more expensive because they're just harder to get in a decent condition. Like obviously that's going to happen with stamps, but you don't have like things like where it'll just break arbitrarily.
So there's an interesting anecdote. Most of the time, if a stamp is stored properly, it will last longer than any of us will.
Right.
But there's one German, it was a little sheet of stamps from the 1930s. And for whatever reason, they used the gum on the back of the stamp had a high sulfur.
Was it sulfur?
Yeah, I think it was sulfuric acid or something.
Okay, yeah.
This was the only stamp that sort of glue was ever used on.
Right.
And it just eats away at the paper. So if you see one today, it just crumbles to dust before your eyes because of the again that glue on the back.
But they're still rarer with the glue. They're still valued at higher with the original gum on the back, because people would wash them off. Oh, sorry. They're still valued at higher.
Okay.
Oh, he froze again.
Oh yeah.
You
should not move,
you, Michael.
Sorry. Yeah, with the original gum on the back. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's sort of and the only other one I can think of that's really interesting. Do you remember the anthrax scare in I think 2006? Or were you too young for that? I have a vague recollection of when there was the domestic terrorist mailing anthrax to Congress people and stuff. And in Washington, D.C., they started irradiating all mail, which means they would just pump it full of like really radioactive beams that would kill any anthrax.
Right.
But it would also what's the word I'm looking for? Destabilize the paper fibers.
Okay.
So if you have mail that went through one of the irradiation machines, even though that's only 15 years ago, that paper is breaking down and it looks like it's been burnt. It looks like it's been roasted because of the radiation from it. So that's something that in a couple more decades, none of those will probably exist because they are destroyed. So by and large, I would say that stamps are fairly stable and safe collectibles, but there are instances where natural factors can break them down.
I was gonna say, how much do those 1930s German stamps go for?
I think they catalog 3,000.
Yeah, about $3,000.
And then if that's with the original gum, and then hinged is probably 1,500. And then no gum, I think.
Hinging's a whole nother story.
Yeah, and then I think no gum was 600.
So you have a stamp. You get a stamp at the post office back in the day. Now you peel them off like stickers, but back in the day they had the gum on the back that you had to lick to stick on.
Okay.
A popular way to keep a stamp in your album was you would take a little piece of
wax paper,
like wax paper, basically, that you would lick and stick it to the back of the stamp, and then lick the other side and stick it to your stamp album. Mm-hmm. So you could keep the stamp stuck in an album without actually licking and sticking it in an album.
You'd use the glue of the stamp to adhere it to the wax paper and then put it on the album page.
Okay.
To like hold it.
Basically, what I would say the equivalent is a mint stamp fresh from the post office with the gum, the glue on the back, perfect, is like a mint and sealed box Lego set.
Okay.
If it's hinged, if somebody stuck it onto an album page, that's like a used set that has the original box.
Makes sense. Yep.
And then a used stamp that was actually on a letter is just like your used set, maybe missing a couple of minifigures.
That makes sense. Interesting. So there are levels.
There's different, exactly. Just like if you wanted to buy a mint and sealed box versus it's used and it's missing a couple of the minifigures, it's a fraction of the price.
Yeah. So like to kind of wrap this back into collecting. For some people, like they'll just collect for Lego, they'll just collect like one theme. Or they'll collect a couple different themes, and depending on which theme you're going to be getting, you could be in for like for Star Wars, they release like let's say on average right now $2,500 of sets a year. So if you want to collect everything, that's what you're in for, and that's not including if you're going back in time as well, or if you're not caught up,
right? Which
is going to cost God knows how much depending on how fast you're going to get through that collection. What is the stamp world look like? So if you wanted to buy, could you feasibly buy every stamp that comes out in a year? Like, what would that look like?
The new issue
for America, let's just say.
For America, every stamp that comes out in a year would probably cost around, I want to say $300.
So that's a really cheap thing to collect, or relatively, I suppose.
The new stamps are. The problem is just like with Legos, when you start to go back, then you can easily spend $50 or $60 or $100,000 on one stamp.
Yeah.
Oh, there's not a comparable Lego set to that number at all.
No, I mean, my company sold a stamp for $1.2 million.
That is
for one stamp. So
I can't even. That is absurd. Wow.
Yeah,
that is incredible. But wow.
For people who don't know, what's the most you could for getting like a solid gold C3PO or something? What is the most I could go spend on a rare Lego set?
Well, I have another quick story. I almost spent $9,000, but that's not 1.2 million on. It was the first ever Toy Fair from 1999. It was the Toy Fair invite. It had Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and it's like, come to Toy Fair February 2nd or whatever for new Galaxy toys or whatever, new toys from the galaxy far, far away. And it was a private sale, and I almost bought it, really, really close. Then I was trying to put an offer on a house at the same time, still working on that. That's a disaster right now, I'm sure you guys know. But like, just didn't end up getting it. Someone else bought it for a little bit less than I was going to end up with it for. But that is about the peak you can end up spending. Realistically, like a retail release set, something that's like non-exclusive, not Toy Fair. Probably that at this point, that Cloud City, I think, would be the 2003 Lego Cloud City 101, 2, 3 for anyone interested. Probably it at like $3 or $4 grand sealed for Lego Star Wars. There are some older sets the Yellow Castle or Lego Creator stuff from way back when. That's a few grand as well, but you don't see anything into even 5 digits almost ever as a singular item. I mean, you can buy a bunch of stuff all together for that amount of money, but most stuff is new enough. Like there's nothing from the 1930s or anything. Yeah, I'm not sure how old was that $1.2 million stamp.
1848.
There you go.
There were no Legos.
Makes sense.
Then.
Yeah. Like you just there's nothing to compare there. Like, and even so, I don't think a Lego set would command that much money if it were that old. So yeah, that is a wildly different world of money. But I do kind of wonder, because I've watched this whole space kind of change in front of me, I suppose. Things have become much more expensive in the last 10 years, depending on what it is. Like some of these minifigures alone, just the figure out of that $4,000 Lego set we were talking about, it's a Boba Fett from that set. It's like $700 now, and I would say just 3 or 4 years ago it was $200. So if you had bought a bunch of those, you'd be swimming in money right now. But like, I think maybe as more people with more money and more people my age get jobs and stuff like that, and they have disposable income, you can continue to see prices on that stuff rise. But I would be shocked the day I see anything sell for $1 million. That is so absurd. I guess we'll need a Lego auction house at that point. Jeez.
And the last thing I wanted to go over for our listeners is, there's some great stamp YouTube channels. Michael and I follow in the footsteps of other people who are doing this. And again, there's some channels that we really like, and we're trying to contribute in our small part. But the Lego especially Star Wars, but Lego in general, YouTube space is very active, and there's a lot of great channels I follow. You're at the head of it, obviously.
Thank you.
But what is that like, and what is it like for you? I think to a lot of stamp collectors, the idea that somebody could turn a YouTube channel talking about Lego Star Wars into a full-time job is a really crazy concept. And we touched on it briefly, but what is that like? And how would you sort of explain this to people who aren't plugged in?
So, like, my YouTube career is like one of the most unexpected things of my life, right? Well, like, so I was doing college. It's like 2016, I suppose. End of 2016, and one day I upload this video. It's about some new Lego set coming out, and hey, this new Lego set's coming out, here's what I think about it. And the video got maybe like 50,000 views, which is pretty good, or was really good for the time. And so I made like $70 that day on YouTube or something, and that was like the first day I was like, oh, what if I could do this every day, right? And then you got to get some levels above that to have like a decently fair income to not keep going through school. But like, it just kind of clicked in me that day that, and I don't think I was making very good videos until like 2 years ago anyway. But like, even so, like, you build into that, right? You practice your craft. I don't know how long you've been doing YouTube stuff, but you probably know, like, from your time doing it, like, you got to start somewhere. And for me, somewhere was 12-year-old me, not very good, but you learn things and you grow at your craft essentially. And like, eventually it just kept growing and growing, and I kept making content and like get it. And I think the ability for like someone like me to like help create a space, I think that's important too. Like, you have this space that can exist, but doesn't necessarily exist. And it needs people to like be entertaining in the space so that people will want to watch about it. And so you kind of help create that, and then that helps create what is essentially now your own job, I guess, for me. And that's insane. Like, I think that having something that you really, really like as your like passion, I suppose, become your job is a really good thing. You guys have to be passionate about stamps, right? To do what you do as well. It's insane. And the thing about YouTube for me is like, it's such a like land of opportunity, much like America, I suppose. But like, for me, I look at Lego Star Wars kind of as like a jumping step. Like, I would love to do other things on YouTube as well, and like kind of reach outside, because you can only get so big as a Lego channel. It's still going to be niche, much like with stamp collecting. I don't know what the cap for like a stamp collecting channel is, but in the Lego space,
much lower than a
Lego
channel.
In Lego space is probably like 1 million subs. You got like Jang Bricks up there with 1 million, and that's kind of it. It's just like, you can't get much farther than that, which isn't a bad place to be. But if you do other excuse me, if you do other things like commentary, YouTube, or gaming stuff, you know, you get 10, 20 million subscribers, and you know, you see some of those mansions the people in LA live in. That is just absurd, right? Like, yeah. I don't want that, but like, I'd like to have that money, you know. it is just, I can buy that $1 million stamp, like, just because I want to. That, you know, that is what YouTube allows for, though. And I think a lot of people will be very surprised to see not necessarily how easy it is, but how doable it is if you're willing to put in the time to figure out what your thing is going to be and where you want to be and how you're going to achieve it. And like, you have to be entertaining and do a lot of things and put in the extra hours for it. But like, it is like, I just, my favorite part about it is how much potential there is. Like, it's just unlimited. Like, you can just daydream all day about where you could be one day. That's what I like about it. But yeah, the community for it is pretty active, is what you're saying as well. So there's, I don't know how many people do stamps as like their full-time job. Do you have like a rough estimate?
Full-time job.
Like,
I wouldn't even know where to begin.
What about, are there any like stamp solely content creators just do that and that's their thing?
No. That's what amazes me. You know, there's a couple other people, but everyone has, you know, Michael and I have our jobs, and
right.
Even the channels bigger than us that are much more, you know, Michael and I do this as a way to you know, hear different voices in the hobby, but there's people who are much more focused on content creation, like the pure sense of the word, where they script videos and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And even they all have full-time jobs. So I think that's a huge distinction.
Yeah, and million subscribers for a Lego channel specifically, is as far as stamps go, it's massive. I don't even know if there's 1 million stamp collectors.
There's 1 million stamp dollars, though.
Yes, I would say the cap for a stamp channel is probably somewhere in the order of what, 10 or 20,000? Would you say? Michael?
Well, I think Graham has like 25,000.
20, yeah, maybe 25 would be the biggest stamp channel.
Yeah, that can't possibly be a full-time job as it is just on its own. So that's crazy how different it is. Like,
I think stamp collecting is really lagging in the digital content creation sphere. I think there has been a lot of progress made in the last, especially during the pandemic. I think there was a lot of progress made.
So my question with that would be like, or the statement I suppose would be like, I think it's pretty obvious most young people just don't get into stamps, and the question from that would be, because, and obviously the YouTube group is going to skew younger towards our age demographic and probably even younger than us on average. Like, how do you get those people interested if you want to build that space and make it a thing, would be where you end up. And for me, like, just looking at it from an outsider's perspective, knowing nothing, I don't see a very clear or easy answer of like getting people interested in this thing. Like you said, they already have these like Star Wars stamps and stuff, but you know, how much has that done? You know, debatable, but like it just seems like a space that's hard to have much content around too. Like this stamp's different than this stamp, and you know, but if the right person comes along, because here's the thing with YouTube, if someone can tell a good story, people are going to watch. I find myself watching all sorts of YouTube videos where I honestly couldn't care less about the like core topic, but the story is just so good, you have to watch. So I think if you have someone like that can tell a really good story and explain why this stamp is cool and put on a real good show, you could have a channel that outgrows what is the existing stamp community. That's what you kind of have to do. You have to reach into the less hardcore fan base of people to get interested in your hobby. So I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that.
And that guy that we mentioned, Graham, I feel like does exactly that. He creates these stories around, he picks a certain stamp and then he tells a story around that stamp.
Okay. And he's a likable, good personality.
Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah. So I think I feel like stamps in general just sort of were late to the punch with all of this. I think even the biggest stamp channels were late adapters. I mean, you were doing this at age 12 in 2009.
Right,
So
yeah.
I don't think anybody was sort of playing around with stamp YouTube in like 2009
Right.
to 2012. I think it's all been sort of latecomers and, you know, trying to make up for lost time, certainly. But it's, you know, it's tricky too when you've got a hobby that is so steeped in tradition and legacy, and it's a hobby that goes back, you know, versus Star Wars and Legos and video games and Hasbro and Black Series and all this is all very you know, cutting edge and relevant in modern. Stamp collecting, you sort of have to overcome, you have to honor the legacy of the hobby while still finding ways to be digital and engaging and you know, modern.
Yeah, it's tough to find something that appeals to both audiences, because I've looked at the analytics on our channel, which you know, we started like 9, 10, 11 months ago.
Yeah,
and it was over a year. It was over a year ago.
Oh, we started over a year ago, and
we celebrated our 1-year anniversary.
I forgot. And it's mostly older. It's 40 and up. Most of it. 80% is 40 and up.
Wow, yeah, that's very different than mine. Mine's, you know, 18 to 24.
Yeah. So there's still 20% that's below 40, and that's not. I can't look at the because we do podcasts. I can't look at the audio analytics, and the audio is larger than the video, but I can't see what age groups.
That probably tells you that it skews older too.
Yeah.
The very fact that somebody's listening to a podcast is more indicative that they're.
Yeah. So I guess my question for you, I joked earlier that I didn't think there was a million stamp collectors. I think the actual number is more like 20 to 30 million worldwide. Charles, would
people
you say
that collect stamps?
People that collect stamps.
I don't know well enough to guess.
I thought those were the numbers.
I think it's somewhere in the tens of millions of stamp collectors.
Okay. I was going to ask how many Lego collectors you think there are.
So it's an interesting question, right?
Is a collector a little kid who gets a set for Christmas?
Ooh, good question.
No.
Good question.
No.
Well, is a stamp collector someone who buys every new issue?
That's true.
Yes. Right? You buy
one? Yeah, but not somebody who buys a stamp to mail a letter.
Right.
Yeah.
So Lego's a multi-billion-dollar company. There has to be tens of millions of consumers of the product.
Right.
But it's interesting, right? Like, but yeah, that is a tough one. I would guess maybe 1 million Lego collectors then, maybe less.
But there was 1 million subscribers on that other channel.
Right. There's 1 million subscribers on that channel, but it's like, but are all of them Lego collectors, or are they just passively watching? And I don't think it's a particularly easy question to answer. I guess it wasn't for you either, but I can't imagine it's like that absurdly many, because, you know, I'm at almost 400,000 subscribers, and I would say I'm pretty saturated at this point. And it's like, you know, where else can you grow from other than trying to basically create more fans through just making generally interesting content to general people. I can't imagine it's much more than like 1 million people that collect Lego, if that, like just that collect on a regular basis, that maybe buy at least 4 or 5 sets a year to add to their collection type of deal.
Worldwide or just within the US?
I would say worldwide. Yeah, because I have people. I think like half my audience is probably US, and then the other half is spread throughout the rest of the world. So, but obviously being English speaking and American, it's going to skew towards that. Do you guys have any statistics on that for yourself?
I think it's I think right now it's 70% US.
Okay.
And the remaining 30 is mostly Canada, UK, and Australia, actually.
Makes sense.
Bastions of stamp collecting. I mean, the first stamp ever came out of the UK, so the UK has always been sort of the home of stamp collecting. I would say.
What year was that, if you don't mind?
1840.
How much is that stamp?
Only about $100.
Yeah.
Really? So they just made a ton of them?
They
made a ton of them.
Yeah. They made. What? How many did they print? 4 million?
No, more than that.
Was it? Okay.
I think so. Yeah, it was on the order of millions. I bought one when I was in London once, because you sort of have to have one in your collection.
I was gonna say I just want one because it's not like absurdly expensive. Just as like it's like a cool thing to be like, yeah, I have the first stamp ever made.
Yeah,
that is just like a great like thing.
It's a great conversation starter. Yeah,
I might buy that. That is actually very affordable. I'm gonna Google that and check that out later.
They made commemorative. Different companies made commemorative folios where the stamp would go in the center and then the story.
Yeah, you could have like a framed.
Yeah,
the penny black.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the other thing is there's two little letters at the bottom of it.
Okay.
So
I see. Yep.
Exactly. The way the sheet was printed, the top left would be AA, and then every column and every row would progress. So a lot of people try to collect their initials. So I'm the one that I bought has CE at the bottom because
now you've made this way harder.
And a friend of mine said that you have to find one with your initials used on your birthday. I said, absolutely not. Am I going to spend like my life tracking that down? But even just to have one of them in your, again, it's not a huge investment, and it's a great bit of
that does seem like it. Yeah, that does seem like the just you have to have it piece for a stamp collector.
I was gonna say you can stop there. Like you don't have to collect more if you have the first one.
Right.
I feel like you can literally.
Yeah, I just think it'd be cool. I just put it in like a little thing on the wall and be like, hey, look at that.
Literally the first stamp.
Yeah. I was on this podcast one time. These guys I got scammed.
Yeah, Michael will try and sell you one now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay, back on the record. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. I've been thinking a lot leading up to this conversation, how Lego Star Wars sort of impacted me, how those seeds that were planted. And like I was saying to Michael earlier, I think there's something to be said. You open a Lego set, it's a big pile of bricks, and you have to apply order and logic to turn it into something recognizable. And
I know you're trying to wrap up here. I kind of had thought about one more thing to add on to the collecting aspect of it.
Please, yeah.
Do you see yourself now? Like, obviously, you're probably in stamps for the long haul. You've only been doing Lego Star Wars again for like a year, but do you see yourself potentially as a lifelong collector of it?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I'm limiting myself to anything Mandalorian. So this sort of coincided with I finally watched The Mandalorian during lockdown, and I had to go out and buy the Razor Crest. I just had to have the Lego Razor Crest, and now I've got every like system scale Mandalorian set.
Okay.
And original trilogy. I'm not doing. I don't know. I just watched season 7 of the Clone Wars for the first time,
right?
And I kind of loved it. I admit that was my dark age was like the entire. I saw the Clone Wars movie in theaters.
Oh, so you missed out on all. I
missed out on the entire Clone Wars.
Wow.
So I watched season. I got up to speed on like a couple of the later seasons, and then watched season 7, and I loved it. And I was like, I should kind of go by. All flaws aside, the AAT looks pretty cool. And now the duel between Ahsoka.
I got you. Yep.
So I'm tempted, and then I watched Bad Batch, and I was like, I kind of want the Bad Batch.
See how fast it tumbles down.
Yeah, but as of right now, it's original trilogy and Mandalorian system scale sets.
And then tomorrow it'll be all the other ones, but it's okay.
Tomorrow will be
my point being, so how much space does your stamp collection take up?
Quite a bit, actually.
How much is? I gotta know how much is quite a bit.
I've probably got 8 or 10 bankers boxes full of stuff.
What is a banker's box?
Like
I have to Google that.
Like a file box. I'm trying.
I see. Okay, that's not that big though. It's like it's like cardboard box.
One of these.
Yeah, you got 8 of those. That's. I mean, but. And I keep collect another stamp. It's just another.
In the office. Exactly.
But it's not that like it's a corner of a room. Basically.
It's in the office. It's out of way.
Okay, I see. With Lego, it's kind of this like forever battle. Well, also with keeping it clean, that's a whole nother thing, dusting and everything. But point being, if you're gonna collect Lego Lifetime, like this that you see back here is just a sliver of my collection, right? Or at least for people, I guess, that might not see it otherwise, you should get a quick view of everything I've gotten here real quick. I have basically a whole storage unit and a whole nother room out in the garage completely full with stuff. Like it is a thing, and I'm kind of curious how it's going to affect the sales of Lego maybe 10 years from now, because like the only thing that can affect stamp collecting is like stamp collecting and like the ebbs and flows of that. But with Lego, I kind of see this point for a lot of people that could happen within the next 5 to 10 years where they just have too much, and it's like you can't, because a lot of these items take up a pretty significant amount of space. you know, you can only get shelves so many times until you're just out of space. Like space is finite in your house, you know what I mean? And like you're gonna run out of space eventually. And so I just kind of wonder if people hit this point here soon. Like I've already hit the point. I just delay it by, I basically have this concept of manifest destiny in my house where I'm just taking over every room here. Because I still live with my parents. I'm trying to move out, but it is tough. So like it's just manifest destiny until then. My brother just moved out to college. You know, there might be a whole corner of stuff in there already, you know, like just gonna happen. So like I think for a lot of people though that don't do it the same way I do, you might hit a point where it's like just you get too much and you start to sell some of it, and you might just completely drop it, or just sell as you go, and just enough to have the space for the next thing. And I just kind of wonder how that affects the market, but that is something to be seen in
That's
5
a good
years.
point. Even if you invest in an expensive stamp, it is going to go in a binder and be out of the way. Whereas
it just doesn't take up that much space.
Yeah, no, it's put a stamp on
sliver. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's conceptually way different. I find that interesting too, of like how easy it is to collect a ton of stamps, right, and keep it generally pretty clean and organized, versus
you can keep it out of sight and out of mind for the most part. Whereas, a Lego set,
you get consumed by this stuff. It is taking over real easy. So yeah, but that's what I wanted to bring up because I thought it was interesting.
I recently moved. I bought a house a couple of months, or I guess 6 months ago or so.
Congrats.
And, thank you. And one of the closet in my office is going to be my Lego closet. I'm going to put all shelving and everything in, but I'm looking at the size of the closet and I'm like, it's going to be a tight fit already. And that's before, I've only been back in it for a year and a half now. So I've got the cantina on the floor of my office because I don't know where to put that thing.
Yeah. See, that is what I'm talking about. You will just run out of space real quick, and then you'll compromise with yourself. Be like, all right, I'll just put another shelf here. And then all of a sudden you got a whole room, and then you end up like me with 3 rooms and now your brother's room, and it's not good. So it's an obsession. But
well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sir.
Leading up to this, I've been thinking, what is it about Lego Star Wars what are the lines, the connections I can draw between like 5-year-old me? I remember it would have been August of '99 when I got Luke's land speeder for my birthday. It was the first Lego set. I remember. Yeah, I was like the perfect age. I was turning 6 that year. And I got that original Luke's land. I think I actually got 2 of them from different relatives because that was like the cheap one that you could get the kid.
Yeah.
And from there, I didn't start collecting stamps until I got to college, but I see a lot of similarities. You open a Lego set, there's a huge pile of bricks, and you have to assemble them and provide order and reason to them to turn it into something recognizable and lovable. And I think it's the same thing with stamps. I get, even if it's not in my collection, I sell other people's stamps, but you get a box in full of stuff. And you have to go through that box and you have to make sense of it. You have to turn it into something that is usable, I guess. Again,
right.
I think that process of, taking all these little pieces and turning them into something that's much bigger than the sum of its parts is, again, at least in my mind, that's sort of the common link between 6-year-old me with Luke's land speeder and 28-year-old me
that's pretty
working
cool
in an auction house. So
yeah.
I love comparing and contrasting Legos and stamps. Michael, we have to get down to Brick Fair, Virginia, since we're both on the East Coast sometime.
Yeah.
It was the weekend of Westpex this year, which is why I wasn't there. But one of the let's go to a Lego show at some point. And again, I hope this opened up stamp people to this whole other world that's out there of
and
Legos,
hopefully I'll be able to have some people come your way.
I was gonna say I think we'd both be surprised how many sort of like hidden collectors, how many.
I was very surprised when I got my email from you. I'm like, a stamp channel? That's cool. Interesting. Different.
I'm sure there's a lot of stamp collectors who have grandchildren who collect Legos, and I'm sure there's a lot of Lego collectors who have grandparents who collected stamps, and it all comes from the same place. I think that no matter what it is we're collecting, it's the same sickness and compulsion that drives us.
Jesus.
So again, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you guys for inviting me. It was an absolute blast. The world of stamps is very, very interesting and unique. Like, comment, and subscribe, everybody. It was great to meet you guys. Thank you so much. I'd love to maybe do this again in like 5 years when I have collected my first stamp and
done.
We can see where the world of Lego collecting has gone.
And if you're ever up in New York, let me know. Seriously.
I definitely will be eventually. I don't know when, but maybe next summer or something, because I definitely need to get back into. I haven't been there in 10 years, so it's been a while.
Well, again, or at a show or something, it would be great to great to thank you in person.
Definitely.
So we'll keep
for Virginia next year.
Done.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yes.
Michael, thank you for indulging like five-year-old me, with Yoda's lightsaber here. If I knew that I was going to get to have a stamp podcast where I could talk about Lego Star Wars for like an hour, that's just a dream come true. So again, I hope this episode was interesting to people. I realize it's not our usual thing. We're not changing this into a Lego podcast, unfortunately. but I think it was fun to branch out for once and, talk to somebody who's totally unrelated to stamps.
I liked that when you brought up that people say young kids don't want to collect anymore, they're not interested in collecting. He scoffed. I mean, he's in this completely different world where
he's making a living collecting things.
Yes, yeah. Where he's talking about people who are 12 to, what was the demographic? 12 to 24 are the majority of the people collecting
tangible things, physical things.
Yeah, that cost money.
And that require manual assembly. It's Legos are such an old-fashioned thing, in my opinion. And the fact that there's still such a fervor and an interest in them, I think is I think it's really heartening.
Yeah, something just as tactile as stamps.
And if you were interested in anything he said about Legos, I cannot recommend MandRproductions highly enough. We'll put links in the bio. His channel is very entertaining. I watch everything he puts out. So just a huge thank you again to Ryan for joining us.
Yeah, please let us know your thoughts on the difference and similarities between stamp collecting and Lego collecting, baseball card collecting.
And do you have any Lego sets?
If
you have a Lego set, let us know. Is this something that interests you?
Yeah. No, but it's an interesting topic of conversation to talk about youth coming into collecting entirely and how to bring them into philately itself. It's
absolutely.
I hope
again, I really enjoyed this. Thank you again. I know when I pitched this to you, you thought I'd lost my mind, that I was like, let's bring this Lego guy on. But I do hope this was interesting to people.
Yeah. For those listening, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, obviously, and philatelypodcast@gmail.com, philatelypodcast.com. I think that's
everything.
Their Twitters, Michael J. Court.
And Charles L. Epting on Twitter. And again, Michael, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, selfishly.
See you next time.
Sounds good. See you next week.
Bye.